Tom Amoss going to be having a busy weekend, that's for sure, joining us on the Players Show and sending out to in the Breeders' Cup. But news just recently, we found out that Lone Sailor will be pointing towards the Breeders' Cup Classic. Tom, give us some insight as to what made you make this decision.
Sure. Well, Gabby, a lot of it has to do with what we thought was the right pace scenario for either of the races, because he was cross-entered in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile as well as the Classic. And one of the unusual things this year in the Breeders' Cup is that the Dirt Mile is probably going to get some defections going to the Sprint. And so I don't know that it's even going to be that big a field. There's a standout in that race in the Dirt Mile, and it looks like that horse is the lone speed. So when you're a come from behinder like we are, that's going to be tough to overcome. In the Classic itself, again, a little bit of an anomaly. It's going to be an overfilled field this year, which is a surprise. We felt that it was important to make our decision as quickly as possible, even though we have till Monday to decide, because, you know, everybody else has to make decisions too. Mm-hmm. So we want to put it out there and allow people to make different plans if they're on the bubble or maybe one of the ones that's not going to get in.
So as a trainer, if, you know, now that you have made the decision, but does anything different, do you have to change anything pointing towards the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile versus the Breeders' Cup Classic?
That's a good question. And I think when it comes to style and knowing your horse, as it pertains to Lone Sailor, I would say no. Lone Sailor won going 7/8. It's one of his 2 victories he's had in his career. So I think we know what he is. He likes to lay back and make a run, whether it be the one-turn mile here at Churchill, which of course the Dirt Mile is, or the 1.25 mile race, which he's done once before in the Kentucky Derby. And he had a difficult trip that day. He came from behind and got through along the rail and to the half-mile pole, was doing really well, and then he got clogged up and was sent back all the way to last and had to restart again. So it's going to be a lot about, you know, trip and what happens with Lone Sailor. In his most recent race, the Oklahoma Derby, he came from behind, but he went around that day, and he had to. It was a tough trip for him, but he showed a lot of fight to the finish. And, you know, if you're a handicapper and you're looking at Lone Sailor, he's an extreme long shot in the Classic, no question about it. Mm-hmm. But if you look at more than just the written word on his past performance, you know, I think that race was a breakthrough race for him. He had a tough trip. He fought to the wire. He learned how to compete that day, in my opinion. And so we're excited about our chances.
Well, he's a horse that's really danced a lot of dances at the graded stakes level. He finally got his second victory on form last time out. Do you find that sometimes that inspires a bit more confidence in a horse leading into a big race like this?
Well, you know, you and I, we've worked on TV throughout the year. You've heard me talk about Lone Sailor, and I've constantly said that he's a very talented horse, and you can see that by his workouts, whether you're watching him visually or the times of those workouts. But he's never put it together mentally. He's never really understood fighting to the finish. He's never understood competition well. We've tried so many different ways to get him to understand that, and it's our hope and it's our belief that this past race has gotten him there, and so we're looking for some improvement.
Switch gears to Serengeti Empress. She's a filly that I think might have won her last 2 races in a combined 32 lengths or so, something like that. I may be wrong. But in your opinion, watching her win those races, does she do it easily? Does she seem like there's more left in the tank?
Well, to us it does. So I think if you're going to criticize those races, you might criticize the field she ran against and say, well, you know, what were those fields? I can accept that. But as far as our girl goes, she is very kind, very smart. So whatever comes up in this race, and I think when you look at the contenders of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly Dirt, a lot of those horses want to do the same thing. They want to control the race early on, ours included. So something's got to give. And if the pace is really quick, you know, I'm very confident that Serengeti Empress can lay off the pace and rate. But we're not going to take anything away from her. And I think post position is going to have a lot to do with people's strategy in that race.
You are well familiar with this track, this surface. Do you think that that gives you any bit of an advantage, not only just training her on the track every day, but also just the day of strategizing and knowing this track so well?
I think the two advantages of being here at Churchill Downs is, number one, you walk out of your barn and go over and saddle, and I think that's an advantage for a horse that's familiar with their surroundings. But the second advantage as it pertains to Serengeti Empress is she's going to have Corey Lannery. Corey's been the leading rider here so many times, knows the racetrack, knows how to ride the racetrack. I think that's a big plus.
And you know how to train on this racetrack, a September meet leading trainer as well. You've also trained so many juveniles to success. What do you find is some of the most important attributes in developing or getting a juvenile at their best on the day of?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the mental capacity, how well they handle different things and being settled for the race. That would be true of any horse, but certainly as you're developing a young horse, very, very true. And I've got a great deal of confidence in Serengeti Empress that she's going to be just fine on Breeders' Cup Day. And, of course, inherent talent. If you got the talent, you got the talent.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here this morning, Tom.
Thank you, Gabby.
All right, back to you, Caton.